Euclase is an antagonist in Houseki no Kuni. I mean, just look at how creepy that smile is. This video was co-produced by Cody. Please follow them on Twitter. Phos Lapis is our protagonist in this story. That's pretty straightforward. I don't think anyone who has watched or read this series would say otherwise. The fact that we don't actually see what happens between the time skips reinforces this, as any other character's point of view is not that vital to the essence of this series. But then, who exactly is the antagonist to Phos? There isn't a really clear answer, since we could say the Lunarians, as they take away the gems, Phos's brethren. At this point in the story, Enma is the primary antagonist from the Moon Society because their agenda, which seemed to have helped Phos at first, definitely runs counter to the supporting nature they presented themselves as. On the other hand, Kongo seems like an antagonist for their inability to fix the flaws that they instilled onto the gems upon birth. Euclase, however, is the primary antagonist from the Gem Society, as their agenda directly clashes with the changes that Phos makes. Kongo is more of a passive observer, unable to enact change in a positive or negative way, unlike Phos and Euclase. Phos gets pulled away from more than one angle to become who they are now, and Ichikawa continues to subtly throw the face of opposition to Phos in a myriad of creative ways. Euclase has impeded Phos's progress more and more as the story continues, especially after assuming the role as the leader of the Gem Society and taking Kongo's mantle as an antagonist. Euclase stunts Phos's recruitment phase. After their return from the moon, Euclase weakened the aftermath of Phos's betrayal in Enma's eyes by maintaining the Gem Society's routines. Euclase attempting to test Phos's plea of praying inadvertently prolongs Kongo from reconstructing Phos for 200 plus years, and Euclase enables the conversion of all the gems into Lunarians, wiping the current batch of the Lustrous from this world and subsequently isolating Phos on Earth for up to 10,000 years. As we've seen throughout the series, all of these gems have one trait that directly plays into their actions. We have previously discussed Bort's overprotectiveness, Antarcticite's loneliness, Ghost's passivity, and Kongo's rigidity. But what makes Euclase act like Euclase? Through Phos, we know that the main reason for all of the gems' actions stems from their love of Kongo. Everything else is a secondary desire. Phos wanting to find a job for Cinnabar is something that gives Phos purpose in life, but their existence is enough to be loved by Kongo. So if Euclase should be happy enough to just be loved by Kongo, what is their secondary motive? Euclase is in the category of the gems where they have a defining role that is better suited for them compared to the Watch Duty, which fights the Lunarians, similar to Obsidian's sword making or Red Barrel's fashion design. These types of gems from our perspective seem to spend more time in their crafts than out in the field away from Kongo, but albeit all of them do know how to fight and can if needed. Euclase seems unlikely to have lost a partner before, and their current partner Jade might have been together since Jade was formed. Does this specialization of role-driven gems comes from their innate ability to fit perfectly in the society constructed around Kongo, or does it come from the pain of a lost partner and the inability to form a new pairing? Although this is just speculation that Euclase might have never had a partner in the past, but unlike the other Elder Gems, Euclase doesn't mourn or reminisce the same ways as Yellow, Pad, and Alexi, who have lost someone significant one way or another. Instead, Euclase holds more of a responsibility because they're the ones who decide which unit patrols where on the island. So even though Yellow and Phos may have lost the most amount of partners, 4 and 2 respectively, Euclase's placement of these pairings and the subsequent abduction by the Lunarians falls on their hands alone, even if it feels like a group decision. The probability and calculations could not prevent the safety of all the gems that go out to protect Kongo, and even though Kongo blames themselves rightfully so, it doesn't really lessen the burden of the leader, and this is the leader who actually makes the decisions. The volume character introductions point out that although Jade may appear to be the chairman or the president of the Gem Society, it is in fact Euclase the one that makes the real decisions. Jade's personality takes on more of a nonchalant demeanor because they can always fall on Euclase for proper guidance. It almost feels like Jade Jade acts as a puppet who just receives orders from Euclase, but in a more suggestive way, similar to how many other gem relationships work, such as ghost orchestrations of Cairngorn's self-harm. But we can take this a step further to say that the puppet leader of Congo abdicates to Euclase after the Moon Arc. Even though Congo gave the gems all this freedom, as Enma says, the idiosyncrasies of the gems are inherently tied to Congo's will. The fact that Congo recognizes that any change to the gem society would in fact be inconsequential, and that reveal from Enma happens shortly after Euclase takes control, shows the irony of this so-called freedom. So the secondary underlying desire of Euclase is to maintain the gem society that has formed around this entity, this divine. What is your desire? Yes, you, the one watching this video. We're about 1/4 of the way to 10,000 strong, so please subscribe for Houseki no Kuni content weekly. Next Saturday there will be a live stream for chapter 96 at 9 AM Eastern Standard Time, so please don't miss it. With Euclase's first lines to the story in chapter 4, we see that they allow a certain amount of calculated risk within their society, probably in their attempt to not feel as guilty of the loss of prior gems because of their specific battle plan. They don't really take Jade's worries that seriously because Euclase makes the same exact mistakes with Phos by handing them a task just for the sake of doing a task, which results in a much bigger mess of the situation where Phos gets eaten by a snail. That is the reason why Euclase barges in front to attack the snail, even when the normal reaction would be to wait for Bort to do something like all the other gems explicitly and implicitly do. Euclase is not acting out of kindness here. It's because Phos got into that decision specifically due to Euclase telling them to investigate. Due to Euclase's blunder with Phos and the snail, Phos gets a reward of fast legs, while Euclase's battle plans for the future months are lost, giving way for Phos to enter the patrol unit themselves. All of Phos's fear from change is first introduced by Euclase's thoughts in chapter 8 about how danger is not perceived by immortals, but the key difference with Phos is that they have had someone lost in permanence compared to Euclase, who probably has never lost a partner. In Phos's 300 years at this time of the story, they got introduced to the concept of death from the snail and equate that same concept to the changing of seasons from winter to spring as the loss of something they held dear in regards to Antarcticite, the embodiment of winter. This added experience takes Euclase's words and puts weight to them. Elaboration about this immortality and the nature of the gems and Lunarians, please check out Cody's thread that he put out on Twitter a couple days before this video goes live. I'll definitely link it in the description down below. But this doesn't mean that we should disregard Euclase's feelings because of their blush or embarrassment when they claim that they can break easily compared to others. Both Phospholite and Euclase have this characteristic called perfect cleavage, which means the gem breaks on a flat plane perfectly. Outside of the simple hardness Mohs scale, there's a variety of factors that affect strength. So a gem that should feel strong with a hardness of 7.5, around the same as Jade, who did a really great job at handling the sound test from Rutile, Euclase would fail that same test, like Phos, even if their hardness is on the opposite ends because of this cleavage factor. Diamond also has the same perfect cleavage in 4 directions and is used as the end product of the sound test. But the fact that we have Phos and Euclase present in this section is more than just coincidence. We see all different spectrums of change this early in our story about beings that cannot change, or should not change. Euclase, the one who is scared of change. Diamond, the one that tries but can't. Phos, the one who is fearless and desires it. This is probably why Euclase takes up more of an administrative role, because the perfect cleavage makes it way too easy to break down and become useless in the gem society, especially in the manner of defending Congo. Diamond has Bort to overcome this weakness, while Phos was never designed for battle to begin with. Euclase's partnership with Jade makes even more sense now, as although Jade does rely on Euclase for proper advice, it's a two-way relationship where Euclase relies on Jade's innate strength. Euclase assigns Phos, who now has Lapis's head, to a low-risk area for patrol, because they are aware that the place that Euclase roams about normally, near the school, is rather safe usually. There are only a few times prior to this moment where it wasn't, and it's always when Bort and Phos are together, so the probability of happening is slim, and Euclase doesn't really know if Phos is really Phos or Phos is Lapis quite yet, so they don't want them too far away. Phos's development with Lapis's intellect conflict is pivotal to the story because Euclase would not have taken overt action prior to this moment when Phos comes back and messes up the Gem Society by feeding small information to others at their own discretion. It's ironic that Euclase wanting info to come out in small bits is exactly what Phos uses to undermine their authority. Let's compare Euclase's reaction post-winter with Phos's new arms versus Phos returning from the moon with a bunch of new changes. Euclase waits until the very end and talks about wanting to test some coefficient of angles, which feels extremely performative, while Jade is sectioned off to the left corner of the page in chapter 21, while in chapter 58, Euclase actively tries to get the gems to back off Phos, eventually getting cut out of the panel itself to show the control that Phos has here and the lack of control that Euclase now has. Euclase asking their question about Congo results in Phos's text bubble to superimpose on Cairngorm, who is their accomplice for the moon trip. This moment in chapter 60 where Euclase's text kind of comes out of the panels shows us the real worry here. Curiosity for fun is dangerous and might be something in Euclase's and Lapis's past interactions that kind of give them this strong, uneasy feeling, as logical reasoning should flow in the same direction for both of these gems, but it doesn't. Looping back, why then is Euclase considered the bad gem here? Because they prolong everything that is bound to happen anyways and cause additional suffering, which I believe Enma did expect Euclase to do to Phos, which solidifies the transformation of something more than human inside of Phos. Euclase rushed Phos's moon recruitment, which seemed like a positive effect and good for Congo at the time, but in fact it was the worst case scenario. They did not actually do anything to counter whatever plan they thought Phos had in mind. If Euclase did nothing at all, Rutile would have asked Congo, and a possible reconciliation between Rutile and Phos would have occurred. If Euclase did something with more authority, Phos might have never had the opportunity to steal Padparacha in the first place, and this is just the beginning of Euclase's authoritarian struggles. Chapter 65's Obstructions of Euclase points to a really cool thing. The way that this page is framed reinforces the idea that this character is obscured in a metaphorical sense. Not exactly to the gems, for they obviously see Euclase walking up, but rather to the audience. And this is interesting, and I'll point to it more in future videos when we talk about actual paneling and layout of previous volumes. The usage of these large papers is significant because it points us directly to chapter 40, when the Lunarians dropped this big sheet of paper with the imperfect Dr. Lunarian prototype, which elicited a strong reaction out of Congo back then. Euclase assumes this role here in this moment, becoming the real leader, while Congo goes back to a supporting role, one that they were originally designed to do by this same doctor. But even as the leader, Euclase struggles extremely hard to control the gems, as well as Congo did in his time, or in their time, because all the gems still love Congo and see Congo as their, figurehead. Euclase doesn't really listen to Phos when they say that something about hardness, because Euclase at 7.5 sees this as irrelevant information. All they really picked up is that it was just a weakness to Phos that can be exploited for next time, as the text bubbles here suggest this advantageous position. Phos trying to use Euclase as a vehicle for success back on the moon is the right approach from both angles, since Euclase is the most reasonable and Congo can't really do anything at this point, or hasn't done anything meaningful in the entirety of our story. But the fact that Congo exists is the reason this method fails, because Euclase can't control all these gems at all, and Enma's wording foreshadows this in chapter 76. He adds the extra modifier to the sentence, "who seems willing to take your side," almost to call Phos's plan into question, but Phos doesn't catch it at all. And that is exactly the intended effect that Enma wanted to happen, because those 220 years are special for Phos's development. In chapter 77, that authority of Euclase is displayed on all spectrums. Although the gems report to Euclase, it is Congo at the center of it all for discussion. And we see the discrepancy in reports where we clearly see that Jade and Euclase do not attack Phos, but Enma later claims that all the gems did in chapter 78, to further point out Enma's narrative and the half-truths that he speaks. I wonder what else he'll do in our continuation of the story. This panel right here is likely the one panel where every reader post-anime interprets Euclase acting through absolute virtue. It should be taken with some grain of salt. Euclase tries to make an appeal to reconstruct Phos's head and Lapis's head, Laphos's head. Thinking about it more, this plea makes little sense. Lapis's head alone could not be conscious, as shown in chapter 44 and 45, and Euclase has known this fact for years, and Euclase is not the type of gem to forget this kind of little detail, unlike other gems. There is no evidence that suggests that the head alone can avoid being in a suspended animation, as stated in 45. Yes, technically, Cinnabar could talk beheaded in chapter 93, and Antarcticite could make some movements while completely shattered, but we can treat those as special cases because both of those gems are aqueous in some nature. Either the situation has called Euclase to make an irrational plea, or maybe Euclase wants to isolate the Lapis parts from the Phos parts. So is Euclase lying when they say that they want to negotiate, or is Euclase allowing everyone to misinterpret what they want to negotiate about for their own benefit? We legitimately cannot tell, as both options have similar benefits. Also, the only thing we can know about Euclase is that they want them to be separated. Whether Euclase cares more about Phos being pure or Lapis existing once more cannot be determined, as Euclase saying that the Earth gems should only reconstruct the bottom parts would make no sense to the Earth gems unless Euclase reveals their suspicions from chapter 60. The only other possible explanation is that Euclase is not being exact with their words. While it is impossible, from what the audience has seen, for a head alone to be out of the suspended animation, having the upper half of the gem's body still function is possible, as shown throughout the series and in the previous chapter. This is rather out of character for them considering their tendency for numerical accuracy. Also, the head specifically is mentioned here. Maybe it is said for convenience's sake, but there are other ways to phrase what they said if they simply mean that they wanted to reconstruct what needed to be constructed. And like this section here, especially with the half-truths or swaying the audience with their words, is really reminiscent of Enma's way of speaking too. Euclase is no better with their plea to negotiate. Euclase's own words and own plan cause the other gems to later reject Phos completely, and this happens exactly when Euclase finally sees something in Phos's words. The irony is that it is just way too late. That Euclase wanting to find a method for all of them is just not possible because someone ends up suffering. Euclase probably internalized the anyone under 5 comment that Phos made, focuses the most on Phos's usefulness instead of Phos's inability to get Antarcticite back. Everyone cannot be saved. Phos understands that. Euclase does not understand this. But it is odd because their analytical mind has accepted that this sacrifice is a necessary outcome. So why give Phos this grand idealistic statement? Chapter 90 shows that it doesn't really matter since Phos doesn't even remember the need for Euclase to begin with, where at one point Phos looked to Euclase as the one gem who might reason with them to find an answer to this whole situation. Euclase giving up in front of Phos in chapter 93 is their final plea, which is yet again ignored. Euclase was allowed to go in their direction in chapter 65 onwards because Congo allowed it, and since it didn't amount to any peace, the only other option left is Phos's. Seeing how Phos doesn't seem to take the olive branch that Euclase puts down in 93 gives us the downfall of the Gem Society. This moment specifically is what ends up spurring Euclase to make what's honestly to me seems like a pretty rash decision in chapter 95, because Euclase never hinted at forgetting parts of their memory, so they probably think that Phos is beyond saving due to exactly the delaying that Euclase has caused. With the snails on the verge of dying because of their slow pace of evolution compared to something like Phos, all that is left in this world is the bottom caste Lunarians, the Gem Lunarians, and the new divine Phos from chapter 96 onwards. That is really all for the video. The volume 12 material, so roughly chapter 90 onwards, is not that expanded upon because one, we don't really know what the implications will be until future chapters are released, and two, I don't really want to rely on unofficial translations as much. I know Black Cat is good, and still, this video is a long one in the making, starting from around February of 2021, but I'm happy that Cody and I could get this out to you all. And again, Cody has put out this banger thread on Immortality and the Lustrous, so I will link it in the description. Comment down below your thoughts on Euclase and if you agreed or disagreed with any of the points that we made. I will see you all for chapter 96 in less than a week. Peace.